just to give a little introduction, we've known each other over a decade. I've seen you in interesting places, very interesting places. During 2016 and 2017, when South Africa was in a state of great chaos before Gupta leaks came out, Paul was doing amazing work in London, which it wasn't in the book. It's probably never going to be told. But much happened there which never and will never surface into the public domain. But I certainly know how much work he did offshore and in the right corridors. I think the place to start tonight, though, is why did you decide to write this book, and then to write this book, not to get some ghost writer to do it for you?
Well, thanks. Can everybody hear me? Okay, thanks, Alec. First of all, before I answer your question, I'd just like to thank Exclusive Books because they showed a great deal of, shall I say, bravery in deciding to buy my book. And for those that don't know, I approached 4 different publishers and they all rejected the book. And the reason they rejected the book was they were afraid. They were afraid of the allegations that I was making in the book and what it might attract to them, either by way of litigation or by way of possible bodily harm or threats. And I'm delighted to say that Exclusive Books, when they read the book, they said, yes, we'll take it. And I'm really grateful.
I just want to stop you. Didn't you offer one of the publishers indemnity, that in other words, if there was any legal suit, you would pick up the tag as well?
Yes. So I approached 4 different publishers. I offered it to all of them. One of them said they would take it, and they wanted a copy to read. And after reading it, then said, no, they're afraid. There was a fear factor involved. And I said, well, what is it? And they said, litigation. I said, okay, I'm not a poor person. I will indemnify you against any litigation. And they said, no, it's not just the litigation. There's other issues. And they decided to step back. So I think if you have a story to tell and the story is true, which this story is, and compelling, which it is, it needs to be out there. And the only stuff that's out there at the moment, if you Google Paul O Sullivan, anybody that doesn't know me will think, that I kidnap people for a living, or I rob places for a living, or I commit fraud and stuff like that, which is the narrative which the corrupt criminal justice system wanted the country to believe. In fact, after years and years of fighting this system, twice, by the way, because I had a similar battle back between 2001 and 2010. So I spent 9 years fighting a corrupt criminal justice system then and won. And this time, the battle wasn't as long, but it was a lot more fierce. And they resorted to attempts to kill me. They wanted to have me charged for treason. They wanted to do all sorts of really bad things to me, which they also wanted to do to my children. So I decided that I was going to take them on, which I did. It cost me millions of rand. I think my legal fees are well in excess of 15 million rand. I had to sell my plane, my boat, my cars, everything, overseas properties. I had to sell a lot of things in order to survive, and I did. And I didn't just survive. I actually beat them. And that's why the story is quite interesting. And that's why they are all afraid of it. And that's why I think we have it all in one place. Because if you Google, what you Google is a whole mishmash of stories. And then you're left trying to understand which story you do believe. Because actually, what's the Gupta thing called? The new age, that's gone. What was the TV channel? ANN7, that's gone. But there are other elements in the media that have desperately aligned themselves with the people that were involved in state capture to put down anybody, not just me, but others. And we have people from the what I call the dirty end of the intelligence services leaking stories to the media and saying, look at this, here's a juicy story for you. And it puts me down, or it puts down Sarah Jane, who works for me, or it puts down Robert McBride, who I had become an ally of, only for the fact that what was being done to him, I saw the bigger picture. So I became his ally. They wanted to put him down. Shadrach Subir, he's here today. Shadrach Subir suffered immense harm. We have Colonel Ramachlachla sitting here today. He was arrested and detained in prison for weeks on end for nothing other than coming to me and talking to me. And because of it, they targeted him. And he came to me in, I think, 2014. And we spent a few days together and we opened a case against then fake Lieutenant General Nklemeza, the head of the Hawks. And without his evidence, I wouldn't have been able to open a case. So what do? They wait till they target me, and then after going for me, they go after all the people that I have worked with, which included people like Ramachlachla, included people like McBride, Anwar Dramat, Candice Coetzee, Sarah Jane Trent, all the brave people that stood by me. And we took so I decided, okay, you know what? You guys want to play dirty? I'll play dirty. They didn't realize that I had the ability to defeat them simply by engaging the truth. And that's what I did. And I'm grateful to Exclusive Books because they had the, excuse me for saying this, but they had the balls to say, yes, we'll take your book.
Paul, many of the people that you mentioned are covered in the book.
Yeah.
And there's, in a way, it's telling their stories. Was that part of the whole idea from or the motivation?
Well, you know, it's hard to tell everybody's story because I can only cover a portion of their story. I mean, I believe that Ramachlachla has his own book. Sarah Jane has her own book. McBride has his own book. But we're not all authors, you know. We don't all have the desire or the ability to put in writing. And after years and years and years of being involved in litigation and writing statements, I mean, I don't know, I've lost count, thousands of sworn statements that I've drawn up over the years, having spent 40 years of my life in criminal law. I really understand how to write. So I decided, I think 3 years ago, there's a story to be told here. And I started writing this book while I was fighting the war. So I hadn't won, but I knew I was going to win.
What kind of person is going to benefit from reading these stories? There's a lot in there. There's a lot of detail. There's a lot of information.
It's 578 pages.
I can imagine in years to come, researchers are going to be using this book as a reference source, no doubt. But what other kind of person sitting here will enjoy it?
Oh, I'd say any South African, black or white or green or purple or whatever. One thing I've never been able or been accused, the only person that's ever accused me of being racist is Edward Zuma, you know, and he said I should be put on a plane and sent back to Ireland and executed. So I think I mentioned that in the book somewhere. If I haven't, maybe, you know, it needs to go in the next edition.
That famous Power FM interview.
Yeah. He was drunk. And I mean, the guy from Power FM phoned me and told me all these allegations of that I'm a spy. First I was a spy for the Czech Republic. First I was a spy for Britain. That was Jackie Celebi's argument. And that I'd been sent here to undermine the South African police. And then I was a spy for the Czech Republic. And I've been sent here to assist the Czech government to either murder or have kidnapped Radovan Krejcir. And then a few years later, I'm a spy, again, I think, for the British government, with the intention of taking down the South African government, of having an Arab Spring type revolt in South Africa, and I'm the architect of it, together with, I'm told, the DA, AfriForum, and there was somebody else I can't. Oh yes, Robert McBride. So between us, we were going to overthrow the government with an Arab Spring-style revolt. You know, so all these little things. And the thing is, if you look at the media don't capture any of that. They capture little snippets of it. So after we had a braai. I mean, it's in the book. We had a braai at a house in Bedford View in December 2016. Yeah, I think December 2016. And that evening I was flying off to London to see my children because I'd moved my family out of South Africa. They wanted to kill my family. They said they would kill me, and if they couldn't kill me, to kill my family. So I moved my family out of South Africa. I flew up to London, and I'd been there 2 days. And you know, in the winter, they're on Greenwich Mean Time, which is 2 hours difference to the South African time. And I was getting phone calls at 5 o'clock in the morning that I was going to be charged with treason. And I was gobsmacked, you know. So the reporter put to me a story that which was leaked by a low-life private investigator called Jad Thomas. He leaked to the media, and he'd probably been paid to leak to the media, a story that I, together with Robert McBride, AfriForum, the DA, and probably the British government, had concocted a plan to overthrow Zuma. And, you know, it was amazing how fairy tale-like, and I think the chapter is called The Fairy Tale Stories. It's amazing how fairy tale-like the allegations were against me. And they became more bizarre as time went on. Months after that, I was charged with kidnapping and fraud and, what do they call it, racketeering, that I was the head of a crime syndicate, and all these false allegations, and all the trials. And fortunately, we had good backing, and we went through the trials and we won. They were all thrown out of court, and we gave them a hiding. So the book is not just my story. It's a story of all the people, the brave people that I worked with along the way. He's not here today because he's geographically in another place. I would have liked him to be here today. I would have flown him up, except I would have been accused of corruption for paying his airline ticket, and that's Brigadier Munsami. Now, Brigadier Munsami spent a year on suspension. A full colonel and the head of the forensics division of the police in the Eastern Cape. And he spent a full year on suspension, not knowing whether or not he was going to keep his job. And they even threatened him with criminal charges. The same with Candice Coetzee, Colonel Coetzee, with crime intelligence. They told her they're going to lock her up and send her to prison. All these threats were made. So it's not just my story, it's their story as well.
The criminal justice system is, everyone you talk, well, many of those that you're talking about are involved in the criminal justice system and have been prepared to stand up. Are we making progress in that regard? Has Zondo done anything to, looking, you know, to your book again, to perhaps raise the possibility or probability that this kind of victimization of those who've taken the upward path doesn't happen in future?
Well, I make the point, Alec, in the book, that the Sondo Commission have failed South Africa. They've exposed a lot of state capture. We spent the better part of 2.5 years preparing evidence for the Sondo Commission. Volumes and volumes and volumes. And witness statements. I stopped what I was doing in London because they urgently needed my sworn statement. I was in London on vacation in August, I think 2019. And I stopped what I was doing and went into the embassy and met with Tembi Tambo and had my sworn statement sworn to. And then I paid for it to be sent by DHL to the Sondo Commission. That sworn statement was never even used. And then they allowed certain witnesses to get into the witness stand. They call them witnesses. I call them criminals. They allowed criminals to sit in the witness box and lie through their teeth. And everything that's said at the Sondo Commission is public. So you've got people, criminals that I've gone after, criminals that I wanted to put in prison. They sit at the Sondo Commission and they deliver all these lies under the guise of giving evidence. So I then bring applications, which have never seen the light of day, detailed applications, setting out chapter and verse as to why what they're saying is false and why I want to cross-examine them. And after spending the better part of 9 months with those applications, I get a handful of letters in respect of each one of those witnesses telling me that actually they're not going to, they dismiss my application to cross-examine the witness because they've decided that the criminal justice system will no longer be a line that they will report on. And I'm flabbergasted, because state capture in South Africa would not have been possible without first capturing the criminal justice system. And I first raised the red flag on the capture of the criminal justice system, and Shadrach's sitting right there, somewhere there, there he is. I first raised the red flag back in 2012, when I picked up that a certain nameless, whose name we now know, Sunday Times journalist had run a story on the so-called Zimbabwe renditions. And I had looked into that. Now, obviously he's got his own version of what took place, but I looked into it, and I have my abilities to look into things. And I satisfied myself that there was no rendition, and that the allegations being made against him and Anwar Dramat were fake. They were false. And then we had the Richard Ndluli matter. And Richard Ndluli was allowed to go back to work after being charged with, I think, either murder or attempted murder or kidnapping and what, and fraud. He stole millions from the Crime Intelligence Fund. So I approached Mampela Rampela, and she teamed up with Johan Krichler, and Freedom Under Law ran an application in the High Court, and they had him resuspended. The court ordered that he be resuspended. And while that was going on, we were able to find out that Crime Intelligence had allegedly paid certain Sunday Times journalists to run this false narrative about the Zimbabwe rendition. And the reason they ran that false narrative was for no other reason. They wanted to get him out of the way, and they wanted to get his boss out of the way, which was Anwar Dramat. And they ran 2 other false narratives.
So they were actually paid by the state?
That's what the allegation was. A witness came forward and said that crime intelligence officers had paid these journalists. I called them out on it. And I was poo-pooed by Ray Hartley. Ray Hartley accused me of being a troublemaker.
But you are a troublemaker.
Sometimes. So they ran 2 other stories. And
Tell me when you're not a troublemaker.
When I'm sleeping.
Okay.
They ran 2 other stories, which were very, very decisive in aiding and abetting state capture in the criminal justice system. And the one story related to the so-called Cato Manor death squad. And the other story related to the so-called SARS rogue spy unit. Now, all of those stories were the same team of journalists, and where they were all run by the Sunday Times. Now, impulsively, one would say, don't go out and buy the Sunday Times. I'm pleased to say that Sunday Times is under new management, new ownership, and they did retract all those stories, albeit a few years later. But the fact of the matter is, the damage that was done at the time was humongous. And then you have all these people, the Cato Manor death squad resulted in Johan Boysen spending 5 years of his life fighting litigation, suspension, whatnot, the whole story. and then the SARS rogue spy unit resulted in the cream of the crop of investigations at SPAs being pushed to one side. So all these fake stories were put out there to eviscerate, disembowel the criminal justice system, because only if the criminal justice system was disemboweled would they be able to continue with the master project, which was to take over SAA, PRASA, Transnet, Eskom, you name it, just take the whole lot over. And their last target would have been Treasury. And then they would have had everything. They would have had a full house, so to speak. Now, I realized in 2012, I wrote to Yusef Abramji. He was then, I think, at the Pretoria Press Club, or I can't remember what, but he was the head of news at 702. And I told Yusef, you need to deal with this situation. It's not very good. And he ran something on the news, and he wrote to Ray Hartley. And a vicious attack from Ray Hartley on 702 and against me. And so that was in 2012. After that, nobody would listen to my story. So I just waited, and as more evidence came up, I carried on again. And as you know, the rest is history.
Are they listening now?
Well, I think if you see what I've said in the book, I said I'm coming for them. So the ones that I haven't got, because we've now quite a few. In the last year and a half, we've charged 12 generals in the police. That's a lot of generals. And we can thank people like Robert McBride and Ramachlachla and Moonsamy.
Why is the state not doing this?
Well, the state, that is the state. So McBride was running IPID. Now, IPID has been recaptured.
That's the point, yeah.
It's been recaptured. So we have the National Prosecuting Authority. There's no doubt in my mind that the capture of the Prosecuting Authority took place it started in 2010. So you had this situation where after Celebi was sent to prison, which he never went to, but after he was sent to a prison that he didn't go to, the National Prosecuting Authority was captured. And you had, first of all, the appointment of an acting head, which was Nomkhobo Jiba. And the DA started rattling sabers, so they realized they couldn't appoint her. So they then appointed, and the they being Michael Hulley, which is Suma's lawyer. He suggested, let's appoint Sean Abrahams. So they appointed Sean Abrahams. And he was the national director of the prosecuting authority, and yet he was taking instructions from Zuma's lawyer, Michael Hulley, and from Nomkhobo Jiba, who was supposed to be his 2IC. So the whole thing was captured, and the decisions about who to prosecute and who not to prosecute, all those decisions were being taken by Sean Abrahams.
There's a lot of detail in this book, lots of information, lots of stories that haven't been told, that have now been told. But looking back with all this experience that you have, how could we have gotten to a better conclusion sooner? We know that the NGOs fought well, Forensics for Justice, which you started, the various other NGOs as well that were in the fight. But was there anything that could have been done to have made this come to a head quicker? And indeed, is there anything that should be done going into the future?
Yeah. So my big concern, Alec, when I watched the Sondo Commission, was to see cabinet ministers or ex-cabinet ministers or ex-CEOs of state-owned companies sitting there and telling about how they were influenced into doing the things they did and how they failed to take steps. And actually, my problem with the Sondo Commission was none of the evidence leaders said to them, and I'll give you a classic example. Pravin Gordhan, in 2017 or 2016, I've got the date. The date's in my book. I said to him at a conference, why haven't you fired Dudu Mayeni? And his comment was, the whole board of SAA is going to be replaced. She was only fired 20 months later. So she had a further 20 months in office. And he admits to the Sondo Commission that the reason why he didn't fire her was because that would have put him in bad form with Jacob Zuma. We've got other ministers or deputy ministers who knew about the Gupta corruption and only told their story at the Sondo Commission. But if you read Act 12 of 2004, which is the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act, it makes it crystal clear that if you're a responsible person and you know about corruption, you have a legal obligation to report it and open a criminal docket. So if all of those ministers and deputy ministers and CEOs of state-owned companies had all gone, albeit to a corrupt and captured police force, and opened dockets, they could have then said at the Sondo Commission, and by the way, Mr. Chairman, I opened a docket 3.5 years ago, and the police did nothing. Not one of them opened a docket.
Yeah. But Paul, it's all in the public domain now. Certainly in your book, it's pretty crystal clear what went on and who was victimized. And yet those people who did stand up have not been rewarded in any way. I'm not talking about a financial reward, but in fact, look at someone like Cynthia Stimple, for instance, who you do mention as well from South African Airways. Yeah. They are still suffering the consequences of standing up for the rest of us.
Yeah, I understand that. So in life, you have a decision. You have a decision to go with the flow or do the right thing. And every person on this planet has that ability. In the front of my book, I've quoted a very famous Irishman. I'm going to read it to you. And I've said the following. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. That's it. And that's from Edmund Burke, a couple of 100 years ago.
I got a feeling that comes under every one of your emails as well.
Yeah. It's been my email sign-off line for the last 20 years. And underneath that, I've put another quote, which is a quote by Paul O Sullivan. And it says, when bad people rise up, it's up to the rest of us to drag them back down. A simple enough solution, I suppose, but one that works.
So, Paul, you decided to write the book yourself, not to get a ghostwriter. Why?
So I had a very good team of people to help me edit the book, because maybe the way I tell things is slightly different than the way a reader would like to read it. So there was a lot of editing done, but yeah, it's my story.
And if you were to say to someone who walks into Exclusive Books and they pull the book off the shelf, what part of it should they look at which is going to give them a feeling that, yes, they must buy it, they must take it home?
Oh, I don't know, I guess the back cover.
I thought the front cover with a good-looking guy on it.
Well, I don't know about the good-looking guy. My wife, maybe, but nobody else. I know the back cover, it says just one part of it. In May 2012, O'Sullivan uncovered false stories published by the Sunday Times alluding to so-called Zimbabwe renditions. The stories were used to fire good cops, gain control of the police, and capture the South African criminal justice system. In October 2012, O'Sullivan opened a criminal docket against crime intelligence boss Richard Ndluli and National Prosecuting Authority NPA bosses Lawrence Mwebi and Nomkhobo Jiba. Jiba was later fired from the NPA, and both Mwebi and Ndluli were suspended from their positions. And Ndluli went on to be convicted of unrelated offences and was sent to prison. By early 2016, O'Sullivan's corruption-busting charity, Forensics for Justice, had opened no fewer than 50 criminal dockets relating to the underworld capture of the criminal justice system and state-owned companies like South African Airways, the Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa, Eskom, and Transnet. This is a story of how a corrupt police and prosecution service tried desperately to stop O'Sullivan from exposing the dark underbelly of South Africa and how they ultimately failed.
Paul, I've read the book a couple of times now, from early drafts to the final product, and there's some wonderful stories there, but I'd like to just throw some names at you and then just give us a little nutshell on them, starting with Dudu Mayeni.
Dudu Mayeni, primary school teacher, mistress of Jacob Zuma, and mother of one of his children, Talenti Mayeni. And if you're blessed, you're blessed. And Talenti Mayeni and Dudu Mayeni became very wealthy because of their relationship with Jacob Zuma, not because of their hard work. And Dudu Mayeni wasted no time in getting control of South African Airways. And after taking control of South African Airways, she decided to get rid of all the good people that worked at South African Airways, the people that would expose her conduct. That included the then CEO, Monwabisi Kalawi, and the head of routes. You know, in a big airline, you need somebody that heads up the routes, and that's working out where the planes will fly and where the money is to be made. Chap by the name, I think his name was Bosch, got rid of him. She got rid of all the good people at SAA, and she got rid of them by going to an internet cafe and logging on at an internet cafe with a fake name and sending anonymous tips into a tip-offs line that SAA were running, where she put down a whole lot of lies about these people. And this led to those people being suspended and a witch hunt being mounted against them. And well-known law firm ENS Africa were paid millions of taxpayers' money to go after these people. And they did a really good job, you know, and all these people lost their jobs. And then, of course, they went after me. So they were even paid to go after me. So
she's a princess.
Yeah.
Patlani?
Okay, so Patlani was a career policeman. I describe him as a career apartheid policeman because he joined the police in the 80s. And there's a differential, by the way, because the policemen, the young policemen or the middle-aged policemen today who weren't policemen in the 90s, in the 80s, they learnt their trade, if you want to call it that, their profession. They learnt it in terms of our current constitution, and they tend to be a little bit more ethical. Whereas the cops that were trained and brought up in the police, the black cops I'm talking about, as well as the whites, some of them, but some of the black cops that were brought up into the police in the 80s were trained to do the wrong thing. They were never trained to do the right thing. And we've still got quite a few of those cops left. Not too many now. They're gradually reaching retirement age. But a lot of those cops need to be pushed out now. Now, Patlani was a career policeman. He managed to, through a process, become the head of HR. He was in charge of the human resources in the police. And that gave him enormous power. And while he was head, it's not mentioned in the book, but while he was head of human resources, he made a lot of people very senior policemen that weren't fit to be senior policemen. And they became problems later. In other words, he planted the sleepers. Then he went on to head up the divisional head of forensics. And while he was head of forensics, and it's covered in some detail in the book, he sold his soul to the suppliers of police forensic materials. And this was actually the docket we opened against him, was based on his relationship with a supplier of forensic materials and how they had 50 million left in the budget and he burnt it all in one day. He spent the 50 million in one day. I think they got the quotation in the morning, placed the order at lunchtime, got the invoice at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and paid the invoice before they shut the system down at 4 o'clock. So it was a rapid purchase of 50 million rands worth of chemicals. And the type of chemicals they buy have a shelf life of 2 years. And if you look at the quantities they were buying per annum, he went ahead and bought 10 years supply of forensic chemicals, knowing that it had a 2-year shelf life. So if that wasn't corruption, God knows what else. And then it turns out that the supplier of that company, a Polish lady by the name of Komodolowicz, Jolanta Komodolowicz, it's not just a coincidence that the carpets in her home are the same as the carpets in his house.
Ntsemeza.
Aye?
Ntsemeza.
How do you spell it?
Ntsemeza. N-T-Z-E-M-E-Z-A.
Let me see.
All right, let's move on. Trindadi.
Trindadi. So Trindadi is a South African of Portuguese origin who lives in Bedford View. And him and his family have been running for a number of years a very corrupt organization. And they were the main... So we opened a docket, I think, in 2019 against them. Him and his lawyer, a money-grabbing lawyer by the name of Lawrence Houders, whisked me off to the court to get an interdict against me for harassment because I demanded that he pay the money back. He stole 1.5 billion from Eskom. So we opened a criminal docket against him. And I think in late November 2019, my dates could be wrong, it could be 2020. In late November 2019 or 2020, he finally, because I decided I wasn't going to waste any more money on lawyers, he finally got an interdict saying I couldn't speak to him or his family. Well, I didn't need to. The docket was open, it was finalized. And a week later, he got arrested and charged along with the Eskom people for corruption, and they're standing trial at the moment. I went, as part of that investigation, I flew to London. I met with the ex-Group 5 guy, Mike Lomas, who I think you knew, and I managed to get Mike Lomas to give a very, very damaging sworn statement, not only admitting his role in the corruption, but explaining where Tony Trindadi fitted into the corruption. So I was quite pleased to see them all getting charged.
On the upside, he's in the audience, McBride, Robert McBride.
McBride, yeah. I mean, there he is. I call him Bomber because of his history. So I think I'm the only person that calls him that.
Well, the only person still alive who can...
Yeah, I call him Bomber McBride, you know, but it's the Irishness, you see, because the Irish also, you know, they used to set off bombs and things. But anyway, history is history. You can't change what happened. The Truth and Reconciliation Committee did their thing, and because of it today we have relative peace and calm in South Africa. We're not free of corruption, unfortunately, but we are, as a nation, we are able to live together in peace and harmony for the most part. You know, we have a few politicians who make racist comments, but for the most part, many a time I've sat with McBride and we've finished a bottle of Jameson or a barrel of Guinness. But an ethical person, despite what anybody may think of him. I've known him for years and years and years, and he is a person of the highest of ethics. I would trust my life with him. More importantly, he was a person that I decided I would fight for. So when they unlawfully suspended him, which was, I think, a few weeks after we opened a docket against Ntlemeza in early 2015. So I'd opened a fairly substantial with Ramaklakla, and we'd sat with McBride on a Sunday evening. Now, you know, when a cop is prepared to work on a Sunday afternoon and Sunday evening to get a case over the line, you know you're dealing with decent people. And we sat there in his offices in Pretoria, and we finalized the docket and we opened it. And 3 weeks later, the carrying of that docket by IPID was a big problem, because that was a docket against Ntlemeza, and there was another docket that I'd opened at the same time against Paklani. And he had these dockets. And 3 weeks later, he got suspended. So the next thing I did was I paid a visit to Murray Hathorn. I think he's here somewhere. Put your hand up. There's Murray at the back there. So I have some great friends in this world, and Murray I count as one of them. Murray is the head of the pro bono department at Webber Wentzel. Before I went to see Murray, I went to see my friend at the Helen Suzman Foundation, and I managed to convince them, having already convinced them to fight a war on behalf of Shadrach and Dramat. I then convinced them to fight another war on behalf of McBride, and we won. You know, it was a fantastic battle. It lasted several years, and we won. And he got back in his job. And the day he got back in his job, I phoned him and I said, hey, let's have a meeting. And after that, the head started rolling.
Thank you. Peter Horne.
Okay, so Peter Horne, apart from being a useless rugby player, I think everybody knows who Peter is. He went to school here in Pretoria, and then his family decided to become exiles in the 60s, and Peter became a politician in the Labour government of the United Kingdom, and him and I became friends. And I must be honest with you, Peter Horne is probably the best loyal friend to South Africa in the House of Lords, or indeed the government. We have no better friend. Myself and Sarah Jane, even for a number of years, would assist in drafting speeches for him to deal with South African issues. And we brought to his attention the evidence so that when he stood up in the House of Lords and made these statements, he knew that he wasn't being led up a garden path, that he was talking from a position of trust. And I still count him. In fact, I'm seeing him next Monday. We're having a function at South Africa House in Trafalgar Square to say goodbye to Tembi Tambo, who's having a going away party on Monday. So I'll be meeting with him then, and I'll be giving him a copy of my book. I've got his books. You know, he puts out a book once a year. So I've got his books. So yeah, he's a good guy. And despite what everybody may think about him, some of the diehards believe he was bad for us as sports people. But he had a purpose in his life, and he stuck to his guns. And he's equally as well stuck to his guns in fighting against corruption in South Africa.
You mentioned her, and she's in the audience, Sarah Jane.
Sarah Jane, yes, she's here somewhere. There she is. So Sarah Jane joined me, must be more than 5 years. No, it must be more than that. 7 years ago as an intern. And, you know, when you take an intern on, they have to work for a few months for peanuts. And then at some point, I think 3 months after that, I decided that she was good enough material to work with us, and she's been with us ever since. She's been the backbone of our organization. Apart from the time, in fact, every time I got arrested, she was one of the first people to rock up with the lawyers. She's a lawyer herself. We've cracked some really big cases together. Bomber will tell you the cases that we worked on with IPID together. We cracked some really, really big cases. So she has the mental capacity and the ethics and the legal knowledge to put proper investigations together. And we've done some really big cases. So she's the backbone of Forensics for Justice. And together we've cracked, you know, as I say, we've helped turn things around in the country.
And it's dangerous work, as your experience and Sarah Jane's experiences show us. Just share a little bit about the insides of cells that you've seen, both of you.
Okay, so I was the first time they arrested me. They dragged me off the plane with my 2 small children. At the time, Mary was 8 and Anna was 9. And I was on my way back to the UK to take them to school. And they dragged me off the plane with them. And then I ended up in a jail cell. And I thought I was being taken to Kempton Park, but they took me to Pretoria Central. and they sat me down in a place where there's raw sewage running across the floor. And when Sarah Jane arrived there, she had high-heeled shoes on, and she's tiptoeing through this raw sewage. And these stupid cops, they are so stupid. They wanted my computer. My computer was in the bag, but they allowed my bag to go without even looking in it for the computer. They really dumb. They would have found nothing on the computer anyway because everything was encrypted, but they really dumb. They raided our offices on another occasion. I got a knock on the door. I thought it's strange. We were working in the boardroom. I went to the door. There were some traffic cops there, and they wanted to talk to me about some motor vehicle accident that I was allegedly involved in a few weeks earlier. And when they gave me the registration number of the car, I got suspicious because that was a car I'd sold a year earlier. So I came back in. I said to Sarah Jane, I'm out of here. I think there's going to be an attempted hit on me because they tried to kill me a number of times over the years. So I jumped in my car and I was gone up the street. And as I was going up the streets, there's all these cars coming down the street in the opposite direction. I'm swerving in and out of them like that. It's an interesting video. You must watch it. And then, of course, the garage door started going down. But one of these people, they all turned out to be dirty cops from the Northwest province. And they were after me and Sarah Jane. They wanted to lock us up. And they got her. And they took her away and they slapped her in cells at Camille Drift Police Station with maggots and rat droppings and God knows what else on the floor. And then I launched an urgent application and we got her out. That was on the Friday night. We only got her out on the Sunday. And she was released on the Sunday, having spent 2 nights in these rotten conditions. And then the next day, they grabbed me again and they put me in the same cell. And then another urgent application and they got me out again. So, and then I think I was standing in Trafalgar Square with you in April 2017. And we had a little bit of a...
Zuma must go campaign, yeah.
Outside of the embassy. And while I'm talking, because you invited me to speak on the microphone, I got a message that the cops are raiding my offices right there and then at that time. And there they were raiding my offices. And they're so stupid because what they were looking for was actually on the boardroom table and they left without taking it. So they're really dumb people. But that's the thing about them. The reason they were dumb is because they're actually criminals. And they knew what they were doing was wrong. And they're going to pay for it. I'm going to put them all in prison.
How?
The law. I'm going to prosecute them myself. I've had multiple communications with Shamila Batowi. There's a whole team of prosecutors now working on all the dockets I've opened against all these criminals. And I've made it clear to the state that I have the resources. And if they don't want to prosecute any of these people, they must just tell me which one they don't want to prosecute, and I will prosecute him myself. As simple as that. And I will prosecute them.
Paul, when I first met you, it was over a decade ago. I remember it was our studios were, it was a radio show. Our studios were at Melrose Arch. And it was a national radio show. And you said, no, you can't tell anybody that I'm coming. You can't tell them that I'm here because you came in, came on air, and left immediately afterwards. We're sitting here in a very public place. What's changed?
Not a lot. So, you know, I've got my friend here, and I've got my biggest friend upstairs. God looks after me. If I was meant to be gone, I would be gone already. They tried to kill me in the last 5 years 7 times. Right now, as we speak, there's a hit out on me. And I've been in discussion with Andrew Chowkey, because we now know who the person is, and they are in the process to arrest that person. But he hasn't been arrested yet. And he's made it clear that he will kill me on sight. And we know who's paid him. So those threats are always there. But, you know, we had this nice audience here. And if they all look around, they can try and work out who my bodyguards are, because there's lots of them here tonight. So you'll never figure out who they are, but they're here.
Do you do that? Do you walk around? Do you have to walk around with bodyguards?
No, The only reason I have that tonight is because this event was published. So normally I move around quietly and discreetly, and you don't tell people where you're going and change your routes all the time. Check the rear view. You know, I've got a whole lot of processes that I go through. When I move in and out of the country, I do it discreetly. So I don't leave an opportunity for somebody to, and if you see where I live, it's like Fort Knox. So if they do want to come in, good luck to them, because when they get over that wall, they're going to get lead poisoning.
Why is it worth it? That's a heck of a way to live. And it's because of well, it's self-imposed. It's what you've decided, the route you've decided to take.
Yeah.
Why in the heart
Okay,
of
let me
hearts?
tell you, Alec, I've got an Irish passport, Australian passport, South African passport, and a British passport. I can live and a green card. I can live anywhere I want. Well, the green card has lapsed, but I can get another one like that. Click my fingers and I can get it. I can live anywhere I want. Now, would any right-thinking South African deliberately choose to live in London? Huh?
We've had this conversation before.
I mean, you know,
The weather, for one, is
I was
fantastic.
brought up in the west of Ireland, right by the seaside, and we lived in poverty. If we wanted food, we used to get crabs under the rocks. And my uncle used to say, the weather, well, we lived on Sligo Bay. And Sligo was on the other side of the bay. If you could see Sligo, it was going to rain. If you couldn't see Sligo, it was raining. And I mean, who wants to live in... I got up this morning, it was a bit chilly, but I looked at the sky, bright blue sky. You're almost guaranteed a blue sky every day in South Africa when you get up. Where else in the world can you do that? Yeah, I mean, you can go and live in Texas, where it's 38 degrees and sweltering heat. I believe the Joburg weather is the best in the world.
And do you think there's blue sky for South Africa? You mentioned the concerns about the criminal justice system not being part of the Sondo Commission.
I will fix it. So I'm not on my own, you know. I don't know if you ever saw everywhere in the world where there's change, it's never one person. It's a group of people. Every South African has a vested interest in making this country a good country. And the people that don't have a vested interest in it are the criminals. So all we have to do is stick together, do the right thing, don't commit crime ourselves, support those that are doing something. I mean, you know, I run a charity called Forensics for Justice. My accounts lady is sitting right there. She will tell you now who our biggest donor is. You know, it's me. Now, if I had lots of South Africans donating money to Forensics for Justice, I could have a whole team of people doing what I do. But, you know, it's only me and a small group of people. And I think in the last year, have we had 100,000 in donations? Have we had that much? We have in the last year. Okay. In the last 5 years, have we had 500,000 in donations? No. You know, now, you know, if you want to have the right people on the job, you have to pay them good money. I can't do that. So I have to employ people in other activities and then force them by twisting their arm around their back to work on Forensics for Justice stuff. It's obligatory for all my staff to spend the minimum of 10% or sometimes more. And sometimes I look at a project like, and I'll spend hundreds of thousands of rand on a project because I believe it's in the public interest. Or in the case of corrupt cops, I'll spend millions. And it's necessary because if we make the country, if we bring the country back to what it should be, Mandela's dream for this country was a multiracial community where we all lived in harmony and the government looked after the poor. Today, many of us do live in harmony, but the government are stealing from the poor. So we have to fix that. And the only way to fix it is to work together and keep at it. And I believe that eventually justice will prevail.
You happy to take some questions from?
Sure.
Here comes the microphone.
Do you think Jacob Zuma should face treason charges?
What did he say?
Do you think that Jacob Zuma should face treason charges?
So, if you read the act, it's impossible that he could be charged with treason. Because the offences he committed, he was the president. How does the president get charged with treason unless his conduct is aimed at overthrowing the government? And his conduct wasn't aimed at doing that. His conduct was aimed at stealing everything in the kitty. So his offences are not treason. It's outright theft and corruption on a large scale, organised crime. The biggest crime syndicate ever to hit this country was the Zupta-led crime syndicate. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Well, I'm sure you
Okay, Nicola. By the way, if any of you need a good town planner, Nicola is the best town planner in South Africa, and she does the town planning on all my properties, because everyone thinks that I'm just a forensic person, but my biggest business is actually property development. It has been for many years, and Nicola is the best town planner in the world. Sorry, Nicola, go ahead.
Thank you, Paul. You asked at the beginning who should be reading this book, and who should be reading this book. And this book should be read by every South African, like me, who's trying to raise children in this country and who's worried about our future and where we're headed. And this book gives you hope, and it gives you hope that things are turning around, and that it tells us we all need to do the right thing, and we have to keep on doing it, and it will have great rewards if we all stand together and do what is right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola.
I agree with you. It's a case of everybody who has an interest in the future of South Africa, read the book, because when you've read it, you'll say at the end of it, okay, there is hope. It's not, the game isn't over. I can pack my bags and leave tomorrow. But I don't want to. I like it here.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary story, because there are people who were almost impervious to any other kind of censure, and yet they landed up in jail. How many, was it 2 commissioners of police that you sent to jail? That's extraordinary, Paul.
Yeah. Yes. Well, the second one hasn't gone to jail yet, but he is going to jail. As true as Bob, you know. Remember that expression?
Yeah.
As true
Who's
as Bob.
Yeah.
Was that the First National Bank, wasn't it?
Could have been.
Yeah. As true as Bob, he's going to prison. And there's nothing, he's tried every trick in the book with his dirty lawyers. And by the way, we're working now at having them charged. So, you know, for money laundering. So I think at the end of the day, those people think they're really smart. They can do what they want. But they don't realize they've tried everything to put me down, they've failed. So right now I'm feeling quite cocky. And I'm taking them on, and they know it, and they're scared. They are actually worried now, because there's nothing they can do to me now. They've tried everything and failed. So what are they going to do? Come and arrest me again? That's not going to work. They can fit me up on any charges they want. Nobody is going to believe it anymore. So I'm very aggressive towards them. And I've told them outright, I'm taking you down. You're going to prison. The spokesman for Paklani, Malaudzi, what a piece of rubbish that guy was. I got him fired from the police. He's gone. He came from Limpopo with Nklemeza, Ramatlakhla's buddy. And, you know, he should have stayed in Limpopo, because he came down to Pretoria. He lived in a hotel for a year at taxpayer expense, had the rank of brigadier. And the day I was arrested, lied to the media about why I was arrested and that I was running a big crime syndicate in South Africa. I sent him an email the next day. I said, you pal, you're now top of my list. I've nailed him. He's gone. He's finished. He's been fired from the police, and he's shortly to be arrested for stealing from the Lotteries Commission, because he set up a fake trust and stole millions from the Lottery Commission. And then to launder the money, he went to one car dealership and bought a double cab, took it and sold it to another dealership for 40,000 less, and then used that as a deposit to buy another car, paid in the difference, sold that to another dealership and paid in the difference. So money laundering, he's going to go to prison. And when he goes to prison, I'm going to do what I did with Celebi. I'm going to stand there in the courtroom and say, see, I told you I'd send you to prison.
Paul, just maybe to close off with, on the stock exchange, there's a lot of insider trading. People make a heck of a lot of money, and there hasn't been one successful prosecution in South Africa. You've spoken a lot about state capture, and the facilitators we haven't touched on, the Hogan Lovells who you've taken on. Those, the services companies, the lawyers, what do you call them, clowns in gowns or something?
So no, the clowns in gowns, so I refer to them as criminals with badges, which is the corrupt police, and the clowns with gowns being the corrupt prosecutors. And then you have the lawyers that live off the proceeds of crime. And I don't want people to get the wrong opinion of me, because I won't insult every lawyer. There are some really good lawyers out there. And I have no problem with a person being a criminal defense lawyer, because the Constitution says that every accused person has the right to legal representation. So I have no problem with that. But when you get lawyers that meet with their clients and discuss ways of concealing the proceeds of crime, and the lawyer gets a rake-off of the money, and then to use the lawyer's trust account to push the money through, and then to stand up in court and lie for that criminal, to knowingly lie for that criminal, then you've stepped over, because the Constitution doesn't say every person has the right to a dishonest lawyer who will lie for him. It says you've got the right to legal representation. And there's an abundance of lawyers in South Africa that think they are above the law. And you can see their cars outside the criminal courts. They're Porsche Cayennes and Ferraris. And they're living on the proceeds of crime. And I've made it clear, I've told them, by the way. You know, when I went into court with Trindadi, and Hodes was standing there laughing at me. And as I walked past him, he muttered under the breath, arsehole, just like that, as I walked past him. I said, what? I said, you talking to me? I said, you that lives off the proceeds of crime are calling me an arsehole. You know? And he's in a state of shock, because they don't expect that. I've asked for his lawyers, Trindadi's lawyers, to pay back all the millions they've been paid over the years for protecting him, because they know that they were paid with Eskom money, which is taxpayers' money. And I want them to pay that money back. And trust me, I'm going to push this until they do pay it back.
Lots of work for you still to do, Paul. I don't think it's going to be over anytime soon, but thank you for the book. Thank you for giving us a record of what actually happened and informing South African public about what really went down.